What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Quarterback, where we act like we know things about football. My name is Andrew, and Week 6 is rolling right around the corner, and with it, a whole bunch of good games that we have got to talk about. We're going to go ahead and do our usual thing of breaking down just a couple of games a little more in depth, and then wrapping up the video with our rapid fire quick pick segment. But before we go ahead and get into all of the Week 6 games, we gotta take a look at the Water Cooler Quarterback Pick'em League through Week 5. Further expanding their lead is Football Americano with 51 games guessed correctly. In second place is a tie between Donzi Lee and Gridiron Warriors, both with 47. I am still sitting in fourth place, trying desperately to get up to that top spot. And if you had a rough week of picks in Week 5, don't feel bad, because I think a lot of people did. That was a very interesting week of football, to say the least. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the games coming up in Week 6. The first game we're going to talk about is the Seattle Seahawks heading to Cincy to take on the Bengals. The Seahawks are coming off of a very early bye, which is both a blessing and a curse. They are getting some key players back from injury like Jamal Adams, who was knocked out of the Week 4 matchup with a concussion. But now they have the entire season ahead of them without any breaks. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. All the Hawks have to worry about is the game in front of them. And for this week, I think they're in a pretty good spot. Kenneth Walker has been outstanding in the Seattle backfield and should have a great day against the Cincinnati run defense that has given up the second most yards on the ground. The Bengals' pass defense also hasn't been all that great, so Geno and company should also have a great day through the air. But remember that a lot of those stats are coming from the Bengals team we saw in the first couple of weeks of the season, back when they weren't playing all that well. And now, well, it seems like the team has come alive. In Week 5, Cincinnati looked like the team we expected them to be. It just had to be against the Cardinals, didn't it? Really? That was your get right game, Joe? All of a sudden your calf doesn't hurt? Interesting. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow rekindled their connection to the tune of 15 receptions, 192 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. The Bengals offense seems to be back, and that was without T. Higgins, their wide receiver too. And if the Bengals show up against the Seahawks like they did against the Cardinals, this has the makings of a great game. This could be a crazy, all-out, high-powered offensive shootout. And I'm really hoping that's what we get. But when picking this game, there are a few things to keep in mind. First off, it is in Cincinnati, so point there to the Bengals. But the Seahawks, as I said, are coming off of a bye, so are going to be rested up and have had an extra week to prepare, so point to the Seahawks. And with both offenses having great weapons and the ability to put up a lot of yards and a lot of points very quickly, I think they're pretty even in that respect. So I think this game is going to come down to defenses, and I've got to give the edge to Seattle there because they have a top 10 defense in the league. There are so many playmakers on this Seahawks defense, and as we saw in the Giants game, rookie Devin Witherspoon has come to play. And as I've said before, I cannot believe the Seahawks were able to get him in the draft as a result of the Russell Wilson trade. It just continues to irk me how good that guy is. So I am going to be picking the Seahawks because ultimately I've got more faith in their defense than I do in the Bengals defense. And perhaps more importantly, the Seahawks have been consistent. They've been playing around the same level every week, whereas the Bengals have only really shown any life once or twice this season. So the Bengals could make this a really good game, or they could make it an absolute dud. It all just depends on which team shows up on Sunday. But either way, go ahead and book the Seahawks for a win here. Then you've got the Minnesota Vikings heading to the Windy City to take on the division rival Chicago Bears. Both of these teams are sitting at 1-4, which is not ideal to say the least. But with 12 games still left in the season for both of these teams, there's still time for them to make a run at a wildcard spot. Because while we talking heads of the football world like to announce that a team's season is done within the first month, the truth is there is still time for them to turn things around. I mean, look at last year's Lions. They started the season off 1-6, and had the Seahawks lost in Week 18, the Lions still would have made the playoffs. So while I don't think anybody in the NFC North is going to be catching this year's Lions, there's still hope for a playoff push. And the Bears just won their first game on Thursday Night Football, taking it to the Commanders on the road. So clearly, they are headed in the right direction. Justin Fields has looked like a different player since the start of October. His touchdown to interception ratio flipped from 3-4 in September to 8-1 so far in October. The game against the Broncos seemingly unlocked the Justin Fields that we saw last year, and DJ Moore has finally stepped into the spotlight and become the X factor that the Bears traded for this offseason. In fact, Moore's 230 receiving yards on Thursday Night Football is the second most in a single game by a Chicago Bear ever. And though they'll be without running back Khalil Herbert, I think this offense is headed in the right direction. I'd look for Darnell Mooney to get more involved this week and really step into his role as a strong wide receiver too, as there were several missed opportunities last week. And they'll be facing a Minnesota Vikings pass defense that has really been struggling this year, so hopefully they can take advantage of that. But flipping over to the Vikings side of things, the big story out of Minnesota is that the league's best wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, has been put on IR and is going to be missing at least 4 weeks. Fantasy managers and Viking fans alike are going to miss Jefferson this week, as the Chicago Bears have the absolute worst pass defense in the league, so he was primed for a big day. Between these two teams allowing all kinds of yards and points through the air, I think this, like the first game, should be another shootout. But without Justin Jefferson, the Vikings are in dire straits, even well beyond this game. I'm very worried about whether or not they're going to be able to move the ball without their superstar wide receiver. But I guess now we'll see if rookie Jordan Addison is up to the task. Ultimately, I'm going to go with the Bears on this one, as they do still have their star wide receiver, and they seem to be on the upswing. Kirk Cousins is in the last year of his contract. Justin Jefferson is going to be out for a month and hasn't signed an extension with the team, and I think people are starting to worry about what the future of this franchise holds. And before we get to the last game we're going to talk about, I want to check in on the Cardinals matchup this week, because I am a Cardinals fan, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about them. I still maintain this Cardinals team is playing tougher and playing way better than expected, and certainly much better than they did under the last regime. And though I had gotten my hopes up about this season maybe being more than I expected it to be, well, last week against the Bengals was we'll call it a sobering experience. The Cardinals are still rebuilding, and I gotta keep reminding myself of that. They're not quite ready to compete yet, and with James Conner out, things are not looking great. So going up against a Rams team that has a healthy Cooper Kupp back, and with Puka Nacua doing all the Puka Nacua things that he's doing, I don't have a lot of hope for this game. I'll be rooting for my guys, and don't get it twisted. If we win, I will be thrilled, but I am going to go ahead and have to pick the Rams here. As Cardinals fans, we just got to have patience and remember what this season is all about. Then Week 6 concludes with Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys head to SoFi Stadium to take on the LA Chargers. The story of this game is Kellen Moore, the Chargers offensive coordinator who was scapegoated out of Dallas last year. That's right, after he led the third best offense in the league last year, the Cowboys kicked Kellen Moore to the curb, thinking, we can do without him. Head coach Mike McCarthy bought himself one extra season in Dallas by getting rid of Kellen Moore. And when asked about the team splitting away from their very successful offensive coordinator, he said they wanted to run the ball more. Run the ball more? You're running the ball less! The 2023 Cowboys compared to the 2022 Cowboys, passing yards per game, down. Rushing yards per game, down. Points per game, down. Plays where your running back lines up at center, down. Okay, maybe that last one is a good thing, but I think you get my point here. Saying that the offensive coordinator was what was wrong with Dallas last year makes no sense. Saying you wanted to run the ball more and then running the ball less is a clear indication that Mike McCarthy just wanted to get through that press conference and say whatever he needed to say in order to move on from the subject. I don't know about you, but I don't like when guys get fired for things that aren't their fault. And in my opinion, Mike McCarthy has proved to not be that great of a head coach, and I think it cost Kellen Moore his job. So Moore is probably going into Monday night with something to prove. The Bolts are coming off their bye week and are getting some much-needed help back. Justin Herbert has been playing really great football, throwing only one interception so far on the season. And though he suffered a finger injury on his non-throwing hand back in week 4, hopefully the bye week gave him some time to heal and it won't be a factor going forward. They'll also be getting Austin Eckler back, who hasn't played since week 1, along with Joey Bosa on the D-line. So with the return of some key players, an extra week of rest, and an offensive coordinator who knows his opponent like the back of his hand, I think the Chargers are in a really good spot. Meanwhile, Dallas just lost in epic fashion on national television to the San Francisco 49ers. So they're going to be hungry for a win as well. And let me tell you, if they lose this game against the Chargers, the national media is going to go crazy. Now, I like the Cowboys. I really do. I get why people don't really tend to like them as a team, but for me, it's never really been an issue. Dak is really fun to root for, and for the most part has been playing really safe football, and that defense is simply astounding. But in looking at the games they've played so far this year, the first time they came up against stiff competition, they folded. Let's look at what their schedule has been so far. In week 1, they dominated a Giants team that, well, let's face it, has proven to not be a very good football team. In week 2, they played a Zach Wilson-led Jets team, and I don't know what anyone else was expecting, but yeah, they won that game. But then they lose in week 3 to a rebuilding Cardinals team. And though they thoroughly embarrassed Bill Belichick and the Patriots in week 4, we're having major questions about that team as well. So now in week 5, when they finally come up against a good team, someone they're gonna have to contend with come the postseason, they got absolutely destroyed. So while I'm not saying that the Cowboys are frauds, you'll have to forgive me for not being super impressed with their record, because frankly, they haven't been playing very good teams. And while I don't think that the LA Chargers are on the same level as the 49ers, I certainly think they're better than the Patriots or the Zach Wilson Jets, and this is going to be a challenge for the Cowboys. I think we'll really get to see who the Cowboys are in this game. I think the Cowboys offense will be able to get things going against a suspect Chargers defense, and I think that the Cowboys defense will pose a good challenge for Justin Herbert and company. So ultimately, I'm having a really tough time calling this game because it really could go either way. It just seems like all of the Chargers' wins have been in spite of their head coach Brandon Staley because he continues to make some questionable decisions. That said, the Cowboys have only played one actually good team, and when they did, they got absolutely destroyed. So it's tough to say how this game is going to go. I am going to go ahead and pick the Cowboys, though, because I just don't trust Brandon Staley to effectively run this Chargers team and get them a win against a really solid Cowboys team. There's a reason that the Chargers have become a verb, meaning they chargered it. It's because their head coach just keeps making dumb decisions. And if you do that against a really good team in the Cowboys, I don't think you're going to come away with the W. Now it's time for another installment of my favorite segment here on Water Cooler Quarterback, Quick Picks. And no, I'm not just saying that because it's the only recurring segment that I have. If you're new here, we're predicting all of the other games in one sentence or less. So let's get going! Ravens at Titans. So long as the Ravens don't drop another billion passes, I think they'll win. Commanders at Falcons. Well, the Falcons are finally getting their skill players involved, and that's exactly what killed the Commanders last week, so Falcons win. 49ers at Browns. Bosa and Garrett are going to make life miserable for their opposing quarterbacks, but if Bosa is tackling anyone other than Deshaun Watson, this isn't even a contest. Panthers at Dolphins. Cats notoriously hate swimming, so this is not going to be fun for Bryce Young. Colts at Jaguars. It is heartbreaking that Anthony Richardson isn't playing in this game, and I think that gives the Jaguars a massive advantage. Saints at Texans. The New Orleans defense is going to be a great test for this young quarterback, but I think CJ Stroud is up to the task. Patriots at Raiders. Belichick's seat is only going to get hotter when he loses to his protege. Lions at Buccaneers. Tampa Bay needs a lion tamer, and all they've got is a baker. Eagles at Jets. In the battle of the green things that fly, I just think the Eagles are superior. Giants at Bills. Man, the Giants just cannot catch a break on their schedule. And that is going to do it for me, folks. That wraps up all of the games that NFL Week 6 has to offer. Be sure to like this video and tell me which games you're going to be watching down in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you want more predictions and analysis all season long. And until next time, my name is Andrew, this is Water Cooler Quarterback, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.